this bracelet we're using twin beads. I've got some size 10 Preciosa and I've got a little stop bead. Now I'm going to thread up 5 of the twin beads and 5 of the seed beads. So that's 3, 4, 5. Now it's always a good thing or a good practice just to check the little holes in the twin beads occasionally, and it is very occasionally, you will find, you know, a blocked hole. So it's always a good idea just to check, because the last thing you want to do is to be doing lots of work and then finding that you've got a blocked hole. So now I've brought them down to my stopper bead, and I'm going to just secure them over my fingers so I can then come back and just go through all of those beads again. And they are misbehaving, running away on me. Get through there. Get through there. There we go. And I'll bring it down to the stop bead. This little fellow's misbehaving. There we go. Now to make it into a circle, I'm going to go back through the very first bead again. So you can see there's my stop bead, and I'm just going back through that next twin bead again. And if I pull it up, and you see now that makes a nice circle. Just tidy up my threads. There we go. So now I've coaxed it through and I've got a nice little circle. Now the next step is, because we're going to be making this into a tube, I'm going to travel from the bottom hole of my twin bead up to the top hole of the twin bead. Okay. And if you see, I can sort of bunch them up a little bit, because the next step now is to add a seed bead in between each of those top holes. So I pick one up. Now when you first start, it's a little bit awkward until you get, you know, a few more rows going, and you can always hold on to the tail if that helps. So pull that one up, pick up the next one, go through the next top hole. See, it's coming together. And then the next one through the top hole. Next one. Basically, this little bracelet or bangle, which it will be, is a nice easy one, but and there's really only 3 steps to it. Here we go. Now to get my tension in this first row, I'm going to just go around again, because that'll just help me have a nice tension. Just go around. There we go. It's always a little hard to hold it in the beginning, but once you've got a few rows done, it's really quite easy. Okay, so you can see as I've gone around, just pulls it in and gets my tension. Get in there. Gets my tension. Okay, there we go. So now I'm coming out of one of these seed beads in my circle, and I'm going to pick up 3 more seed beads, and I'm going to make like a little right angle weave by going back, coming out of this side of the seed bead, and I'm going to go back around through the opposite side, and it will form, so you can see that now these 3 beads will form like a little, and you can just pop them in place. See, they make that little square shape. Then I'll go on through to the next one, through the twin, and through the next seed bead, and later on you'll be able to do that in one go. And I'm going to do the same again, pick up 3 beads, and I'm going to go around in a loop. There we go, through this one, and then I'm going to go also through the twin and come out from that other seed bead. And you can often do that just in one go, and it makes it much easier and quicker. Make sure it's sitting nicely. Come around to the next one. So if you will, this is like your step one, where you're just making these little picots, if you will, around the ring. One more. 1, 2, 3. And one more. So now I'm on the last one. Back around, through here, through the bottom bead of this next one. So you'll see, and pop them in place there. So now you'll see I have a ring of 5 of these little right angle waves. Now what I need to do is to step up, and I need to come to this outside bead here, and to do that it's simply, if I just turn it around, I go up one side here and then across the top. There we go. And it's called, because we're doing, you know, right angles. Now that I'm at the top, I can bring it up. As you can see, I'm going to join all these top beads with a twin bead. So I pick up a twin bead, check the holes good, and go through the next one. Now you see I'm coming out this way, because as we go around the directions do change, and that is something that you'll need to be aware of. So I'm coming out here and then just continuing around the circle, and my little twin bead just pops in place. And then I'll do the next one. Now I can start to hold it, but the thread between my fingers, now that I'm getting a few more rows done. And then I still don't have too much to hold on to though. Okay, pull up the next one. And then I'll go through the very last top of my, so you see I'm going through the top bead, I'll go through the last one, and I'll also cut across and go through a few more beads. Now, it's a great idea, especially if you're having trouble at the beginning with your tension, or even throughout, because it's hard sometimes to keep attention with the twins at this point. So what I do is I tend to just go around a few more beads, and especially if your tension's loose, it's a great way to tighten it up. But you don't have to do this step if you've got your tension, but I find that sometimes it's a good idea. Now, a word of warning though, however, I always check that I haven't made a mistake. See, I've got the little squares going here, because sometimes, because you're going around, you can go in the wrong direction. So I always just give it a quick little look to make sure that I've got my little right angle weaves all sitting nicely in a row before I carry on, because I'll tell you, if you have to go back because you've made a mistake, it's near impossible. There's so much threading going on that it makes it a very secure bracelet, but that's why it's always good to just have a little check as you go along. Now the next step here, I'm coming out of the bottom, and see that tension's a little bit loose, so I'm just going to go through a couple more beads. You won't have to go through these holes again, so you can even go all the way around again if you want to. Obviously it takes up a bit more thread and a little bit more time, but then it's going to really make a nice secure bracelet. Okay, now I'm going to finish coming out of the bottom hole of a twin bead. Just make sure everything's sitting nicely, yep. And then I'm going to go from the bottom up to the top hole and come out, and I see here I'm changing direction. I'm going out through the top hole of the twin, and now I'm going in this direction. So I'm going to add one bead, one seed bead between each of the top holes of the twin bead. So I'm going in this direction. Now you can always turn it upside down and then you can go up. Pop that in place. Go through. Now see here, I'm able to actually hold the thread and keep my tension a little better through the other top one. So this really is the third step. The second step was adding the twin beads. Now I've stepped up to the top of the twins, and the third step is adding that seed bead between the twins. Now I'll go past and I'll come out of a seed bead. Okay, and then it's back to step one again, which of course is making our little right angle weaves. So I'm going to add 3. Coming out of this side, I'm going around through that side, and I'll make my little picot, pop it in place nicely. Onto the next one, pick up 3. So I'll take you through each of these steps again. Oops, nearly made a mistake. Don't forget to go through to the next seed bead. Pick up 3. 1, 2, 3. Go around, back through that same seed bead, cut across to the next seed bead. Spin it around. 1, 2, 3. Cut across to the next seed bead. You can do it in 2 steps if you want to, but I find it tends to work nicely if you can cut across. Sort of gives you a nicer tension too. Go around to the back of that bead, making that circle. Cut across to the next seed bead here. Make sure my little picot is sitting nicely. So you can see now we're back to the step 1. We've almost finished step 1. And again here I go across through that bottom one, the original one on the bottom. See where I'm coming out of here. Make sure my little picot is sitting nicely. Now I'm going to do a step up here. So I'm going to go up the side bead. So you can see my thread is coming out of this one here. I'm going to go up through this side bead here. Oh, missed it. Up through the side bead here, and then across the top. Now you can see I'm now in a different direction, and this is where you can make a mistake. And I've made this a few times, which is really frustrating if you have to go back and pull it out again. Now we need to continue in this direction, and step 2 is to add in the new twin bead. So now I'm going this way, and this is where you just at the beginning of each step up, it's always wise to just make sure you look to see that you're going in the right direction, because you do change directions each time, and it's easy if you get into like a pattern, if you're watching telly or something, where you might just go in the wrong direction. And I've done it myself, and it's so frustrating because then it doesn't sit right, and then you have to go and unpick it, which is a hell of a job. So through the top one, coming through there. Another twin. Another twin. Now see, I'm back at the original one, and I'm going to go, as I said to you, to keep my tension, I'm going to go through a couple more beads, because the next step up, funnily enough, it's hard to keep good tension. Okay, and see, as I'm going around, I'm just making sure I didn't make any mistakes on the previous row, because it's much easier to unpick it now than to go back later on. It's almost impossible. Okay, so let's have a look. So it's looking good. Yep, all my little ducks are in a row. I'm happy. So now I need to be coming out of a twin bead in the bottom hole, and to step up, I literally then come up through the top hole. This thread is never seen because it's always on the inside. So now step 3, and you see I'm coming in this direction now, away from me, is to then thread a little seed bead in between each of the twin beads. Okay, there's the last one, and again just go past a couple, coming out of a seed bead, and now I'm ready to begin again with step 1, which is picking up 3 beads, and see I'm coming out of this side and I'm going that way, so you can see I'm coming in a different direction. So I think now you've probably got the idea. Just go through there. And there's my next little picot. So I'm ready for the next row, and you can see how it's coming along, and it's actually quite a lovely rope, and I've got something to hang on to now, which makes it might easily. So I'll let you catch up, and then I'll continue along until I get to the other end. I'm just putting in my last row of step 3, which is just the little beads in between, and I think I'm pretty well done, but I'll measure it to make sure that I'm happy with the size. So as you notice, I'm just going around here a few times because I want this to be a nice secure end. Okay. And I've actually already done the same on the other end. I've taken off the stop bead, and then I've gone down and I've taken my thread around and knotted it off and finished the end. And I suggest you do the same at this end too. But to measure it, because it's a bangle, you need to go around the widest part of your wrist, which of course is much bigger than your actual wrist. So I like it so that it fits just fits here, so that then when it goes on, it's a little bit loose here. So I'm pretty happy with that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down and I'm going to tie off this thread and finish this thread. The reason I'm doing that, now you don't have to if you don't want to, but the reason I'm doing it is if I bring in a new thread, if for any reason I twist it or I don't get the exact join, I can just snip it off and start again. Whereas if I'm using the actual finishing thread, then I can't. So I'll just show you how I end this off. And of course, if you need to bring in new threads, that is also, you do that the same way. So I'm just going to travel back down through the thread path below the bracelet. And see, I've come to a little right angle weave area. And I'm just going to weave around that little section. See that? And so to bring in a new thread, obviously you do exactly the same thing. So I'm just going around through that right angle weave. Okay. See, I've gone through it a couple of times. That alone will, tie off your thread. What I also tend to do is I'll do a little knot, and to do that, you can see that thread quite clearly there. I'm going to take the needle, underneath the threads between the beads. When I pull up the thread and I leave a little loop, and then I can take my needle through there and just make sure I'm between the right beads, and you can see I can pull it up and pull a little knot. Then I can just carry on through the next bead. I've brought in my new thread and I'm now coming out of an end seed bead. It doesn't matter which one, and it doesn't matter which direction. It's however you weaved back in again. I've also finished off, I've used that extra thread on the other end of my bracelet, and I've gone down and I've closed off that thread. I've gone around here a few times to make it quite secure, and then I've come down here and I've ended off my thread. So I'm now ready to turn this into a bracelet. Now it's quite important that I line it up nicely so that it doesn't twist, and that's why I brought in a new thread, because if I do muck it up and I do end up with a twist, I can just snip it off and bring in another new thread later on. So it's quite easy to do. You can see that I've got this line, and I can just follow that line all the way down to the other end, and then I know that that bead there is the one that's going to join in to this bead here, and that should mean that I've got it all in position and it's going to be straight. Now I have measured it, as I said, a little tighter. This is one I made earlier, and I did it a little looser. You can see it just fits very nicely over my hand, but when I get it down to my wrist, it's still okay, but it's a little bit loose. And although I like them loose, I think it's just a little too loose. So what I've done with this one, I measured how many, or I counted how many of the twin beads all the way around. And this one had 35 rows of twin beads. I've made a gamble and done this at 34. And it's just going to fit over my wrist, but hopefully then it will be just nice and still loose on as a bangle, and just a bit more of a tight squeeze around here. It's really hard to gauge, and I think because of the thickness of your bangle, it's always going to change, because the thicker the bangle, sometimes the more you need, because the circumference becomes smaller. So I think the best way to do it is, once you've made it, is measure and then sew it up. So I'll just make sure again that I've got my line all the way down. Make sure I get the right line. Here we go. It's this one is going to join to this one. So I'll bring them up together and we'll put this bangle together. Joining the bracelet is really easy, or joining it into a bangle is really easy. I've determined that these are the two beads that are in line with each other, and it's quite simple. We're just going to make one of our little right angle weaves. So I'm coming out of here, I've picked up one bead, I'm going to then go through the one, its opposite bead, like so. Then I'll pick up one more bead, and then I'll go back through this way. In you go. Now you can see that now I've got my 4 beads. See, so I've got that same right angle. And for strength, because obviously this is the join, I'm going to go around all of them again for strength. And you'll do this all the way around the bracelet. I'll just do the next one. And if you notice, I'm going in a square. I'm not sort of cutting the corners. I'm actually coming across in a square shape. Come on, in you come. So I'll just go through that last little bead there. And if it's getting a little tight, you can always use a pair of pliers to help it through, but it should all be fine. And then I'm going to progress through the next hole of the twin bead. and then on to the next seed bead. Okay, now if I bring it around, you can see straight away that the next one in line is this one. So it's just, again, I'm coming out this way, so I'm going to pick up a bead and go through its opposite bead. You can see that now. And then back through this one again. And then I've got my next right angle in line beautifully. And again, just go through all 4 again. It's purely for strength. And now this way, through the last one, and then as I bring the bracelet around, through the next, through the twin, and then through to the next bead. And I'm just going to carry on like that all the way around the bracelet to finish it off, and then I'll weave down and knot off my thread, and I'm finished. I'll try it on and see if the smaller size, oh, that's going on nicely. Notice I'm rolling it. Oh, look at that. Perfect. I'm really happy with that.